Good evening, dear listeners. My name is Victoria Ann Caldwell, and I'm 74 years old. I've lived through nearly 3/4 of a century, filled with beauty, disappointment, adventure, and regret. But the story I want to share with you happened just 3.5 years ago, when I thought my creative spirit had been buried forever under years of bitterness and isolation. This is a story about rediscovering who you were meant to be. It's about finding that the very experiences that broke you can become the foundation for helping others heal. It's about a bitter, lonely woman who thought the world had nothing left to offer her, only to discover that her greatest masterpiece was still waiting to be painted. Most importantly, it's about learning that redemption can come at any age, in any form, and through the most unexpected doorways. My story begins on a gray November morning, 3.5 years ago. I remember it was gray because I had been painting only in shades of gray for months, when I painted at all, which was rarely. I was standing in what used to be my art studio, now a cluttered room filled with canvases turned toward the wall, dried paint tubes, and brushes I couldn't bear to look at. My husband Charles had been gone for 2 years by then. 2 years since the heart attack took him while he was working in his beloved workshop. 2 years since I became one of those widows who barely speaks to anyone, who snaps at cashiers and avoids eye contact with neighbors who try to offer sympathy. But my isolation wasn't just about grief. It was about failure, about dreams that had curdled into resentment over decades of rejection and disappointment. For 43 years, I had tried to make it as a professional artist. I had painted portraits, landscapes, abstracts, still lifes. I had submitted to galleries, entered competitions, displayed my work at local art fairs. I had accumulated enough rejection letters to paper a room. Your work is technically competent, but lacks emotional depth, one gallery curator had written. The compositions are pleasant, but don't take any risks, said another. Nice, but not what we're looking for, became a refrain that followed me through decades of trying and failing to break through into the art world. Charles had been supportive, patient, encouraging. He converted half our garage into a studio, bought me quality supplies, attended every small show where I displayed my work. He never said what I knew he must have thought, that maybe it was time to give up the dream, to find satisfaction in art as a hobby rather than a profession. After he died, I couldn't bear to pick up a brush. Every canvas reminded me of his gentle encouragement, his unwavering belief in my talent that had never been validated by anyone else. The studio became a shrine to my failure, a room I avoided because it held too many memories of hope repeatedly crushed. My children lived far away, Jennifer in Portland, busy with her psychology practice and teenage twins, and Robert in Boston, consumed with his law firm and new baby. They called dutifully but carefully, walking on eggshells around my bitterness. I had become someone people tolerated rather than enjoyed, someone whose company felt like an obligation. That November morning, as I stood surrounded by my abandoned dreams, I noticed an envelope that had been slipped under my front door. It was a flyer from the Mercy General Hospital. Volunteers needed. Children's Cancer Ward. Bring joy and comfort to young patients. Art activities, reading, companionship. No special skills required. Just a caring heart. I stared at that flyer for a long time. Children with cancer. The thought made my chest tighten with a familiar mix of fear and sadness. I had always avoided anything related to serious illness, unable to face the reminder of mortality and loss that such situations represented. But something about the phrase art activities caught my attention. I hadn't shared my art with anyone in years, hadn't taught or demonstrated or created anything meaningful. What if I could use these neglected skills for something other than my own failed ambitions? I crumpled the flyer and threw it away. What was I thinking? I was a bitter, antisocial woman who could barely manage polite conversation with grocery store clerks. What did I have to offer sick children? But over the next 2 weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about that flyer. Every time I walked past my closed studio door, every time I ate another silent dinner in front of the television, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, wondering what the point of my remaining years might be, I thought about those words. No special skills required, just a caring heart. Did I still have a caring heart? I wasn't sure. It felt like mine had calcified years ago under layers of rejection and disappointment. But maybe, just maybe, there was something still alive in there. Finally, on a Thursday afternoon when the loneliness felt particularly suffocating, I called the hospital. "Volunteer services, this is Amanda speaking," came a cheerful young voice. "I'm calling about volunteering with children in the cancer ward," I said, my voice rusty from disuse. "Oh, wonderful. We really need volunteers, especially for our creative activities program. Do you have any background in working with children or in art?" I paused. How to explain 43 years of artistic failure? "I used to be an art teacher," I lied, then immediately felt guilty. "Actually, no, that's not true. I'm an artist, or I was. I haven't worked with children professionally, but I've been painting for most of my life." "That's perfect," Amanda said warmly. "Many of our young patients love art projects, but they need someone who can really guide them, who understands materials and techniques. Would you be interested in coming in for an orientation?" And before I could change my mind, I agreed. Mercy General's pediatric cancer ward was unlike anything I had expected. Instead of the sterile, depressing environment I had imagined, it was bright and colorful, with murals on the walls, comfortable seating areas, and a playroom filled with books, games, and art supplies. Amanda, who turned out to be an energetic woman in her 20s with kind eyes and unlimited patience, showed me around the ward. I saw children of all ages, some bald from chemotherapy, some connected to IV pulls, some in wheelchairs, but many of them laughing, playing, engaging with visiting family members and hospital staff. "This is our art room," Amanda said, opening the door to a sunny space filled with tables, easels, and supplies. "We try to have art activities available several days a week, but we've been short-staffed. The children love creating things. It helps them feel normal, gives them something positive to focus on." She showed me examples of artwork the children had created. Colorful finger paintings, clay sculptures, collages made from magazine cutouts. Nothing sophisticated. It's nothing that would ever hang in a gallery, but each piece radiated joy and energy that my own technically perfect paintings had always lacked. "What would I actually do?" I asked. "Help children with their projects, teach them techniques, encourage their creativity. Some of them are here for weeks or months during treatment, so they really benefit from having consistent activities and relationships." She paused, studying my face. "I should mention that this can be emotionally challenging. Some of the children you work with may not recover. Are you prepared for that possibility?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Was I prepared to care about children who might die? Was I strong enough to offer hope and joy to families facing the worst possible nightmare? "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think I need to try." I started volunteering the following week, coming in twice a week for 3-hour sessions. At first, I was awkward and uncertain. I hadn't been around children in years, and I had forgotten how direct and curious they could be. "Why don't you smile more?" asked 8-year-old Maya during my second visit, looking up from the watercolor painting she was working on. The question caught me off guard. "I guess I'm just concentrating on helping you with your painting," I said. "My mom says people who don't smile much are usually sad inside," Maya observed, with the matter-of-fact wisdom that children sometimes possess. "Are you sad inside?" I looked at this small girl with the bright headscarf covering her bald head, who was battling leukemia, but was concerned about my emotional state, and something inside my chest cracked open. "Yes," I said quietly. "I have been sad for a long time." "What makes you sad?" she asked, adding careful brushstrokes of purple to her painting. I found myself telling this 8-year-old child things I hadn't said aloud to anyone. About Charles's death, about my failed art career, about feeling useless and forgotten by the world. Maya listened with the serious attention that sick children often develop, a premature gravity born from facing adult realities too young. "I think," she said finally, "you're supposed to be here helping us, but maybe we're supposed to help you too." Over the following weeks, I began to understand what Maya meant. Each child I worked with taught me something different about resilience, hope, and finding joy in small moments. There was 10-year-old Marcus, who was recovering from brain tumor surgery, who created elaborate fantasy worlds in his drawings and could spend hours describing the adventures of his imaginary characters. His creativity was unbounded by any formal art training, flowing freely from his imagination onto paper. There was 6-year-old Sophia, undergoing treatment for a rare blood disorder, who loved mixing colors and would spend entire sessions just watching how blue and yellow became green, how red and white created different shades of pink. Her delight in these simple discoveries reminded me of why I had first fallen in love with painting decades ago. There was 12-year-old David, a quiet boy with bone cancer, who initially claimed he hated art, but gradually began creating intricate geometric patterns with markers and rulers. His precise mathematical approach to creativity showed me that art could take forms I had never considered valuable. But it was 7-year-old Emma who changed everything for me. Emma had been in the hospital for 6 weeks when I met her, receiving treatment for aggressive childhood leukemia. Unlike many of the other children, she rarely spoke, rarely smiled, and showed little interest in the art activities. She would sit at the table when her mother encouraged her to participate, but she mostly just stared at the blank paper in front of her. Her mother, Linda, was a single parent who worked double shifts as a nurse at another hospital to support Emma and her older brother. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days caring for other people's families while her own daughter fought for her life across town. "I see sick children every day at work," Linda confided to me during one of her visits. "I know the medical facts, I understand the treatments, I know the statistics, but when it's your own child, all that professional knowledge feels useless. I can insert an IV or monitor vitals for strangers' children, but I can't make Emma smile anymore." The weight of Linda's exhaustion was visible in every line of her face. She had been strong for months, maintaining hope for Emma while managing her own terror, working to pay medical bills while spending every free moment at Emma's bedside. She used to draw constantly, Linda told me, looking at Emma's untouched art supplies. Before the diagnosis, our refrigerator was covered with her pictures. She would draw stories, complete narratives about fairy princesses and talking animals. She gave them voices, acted out their adventures. Art was how she made sense of the world. I studied Emma's small form hunched over the blank paper. Her silence reminded me of my own withdrawal after decades of artistic rejection, but hers was born from something far more profound than professional disappointment. She was 7 years old and grappling with mortality, with pain, with the bewildering transformation of her body and her family's life. "What happened to all those drawings?" I asked Linda. "They're at home, in her room. I saved them all because—" Linda's voice broke slightly. "Because I thought someday we'd look through them together and remember when life was normal. But now I wonder if normal is something we'll ever get back to." I asked Linda if I could visit Emma's room sometime to see those drawings she had mentioned. Perhaps understanding Emma's artistic voice before her illness could help me find a way to reach her now. The following weekend, Linda invited me to their small apartment across town. Emma's room was exactly as her mother had described, walls covered with vibrant drawings of princesses riding unicorns, families of rabbits having picnics, elaborate castles surrounded by flower gardens. The creativity was explosive, joyful, completely unrestrained by any formal artistic training. She would spend hours on these, Linda explained, pointing to a particularly elaborate drawing of a girl with long, dark hair flying through a starry sky. She'd make up entire worlds, give all the characters names and backstories. I used to have to drag her away from her art table to eat dinner. I studied the drawings more carefully. Despite their childish execution, they showed remarkable compositional instincts and an intuitive understanding of how to use color to convey emotion. The flying girl's dress was painted in shades of purple and gold that seemed to shimmer with movement. A drawing of a sad-looking dog used muted blues and grays that perfectly captured melancholy. Emma has real artistic talent, I told Linda. Not just creativity, but genuine visual intelligence. She understands things about art that I had to learn through years of study. Had, Linda corrected quietly. She had talent. Now she won't even look at crayons. But I wasn't convinced that Emma's artistic spirit was gone forever. Sometimes I had learned from my own experience. Creativity doesn't disappear. It just goes underground, waiting for the right conditions to resurface. Would it be okay if I just sat with her sometimes? I asked Linda when we returned to the hospital the next week. Not pushing her to create anything, just being present? Linda nodded gratefully. She needs to know that adults care about her, not just about making her better. So I began spending time with Emma without any agenda except companionship. I would sit beside her at the art table, sometimes sketching quietly in my own notebook, sometimes just talking softly about colors, shapes, anything that came to mind. I told her about her drawings I had seen at home, how impressed I had been with her flying girl and her rabbit families. I don't draw anymore, she said quietly during our second week of sitting together. It was the longest sentence I had heard her speak. That's okay, I replied. Sometimes we need breaks from things we love. Are you taking a break from drawing? She asked, watching me shade the petals of a flower I was sketching. It was a perceptive question. Was I taking a break, or had I given up entirely? I think I'm taking a break from some kinds of drawing, I said slowly, but I'm learning about other kinds. What other kinds? Drawing that helps people feel better. Drawing that tells stories about hard things. Drawing that helps people who are scared or sad. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Are you scared or sad? Sometimes, I admitted. Are you? She nodded, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her since we'd met. Ideas don't disappear, I told her, taking her small hand in my paint-stained one. They might hide for a while, but they're still there, waiting for you to be ready for them again. How do you know? She asked. I thought about my own artistic journey, about the decades of trying and failing, about the years after Charles died when I couldn't bear to paint. Because I lost my ideas once too, I said. I thought they were gone forever. But they weren't gone. They were just changing, getting ready to help me do different kinds of art. The next Thursday, Emma picked up a crayon for the first time in weeks. She didn't draw anything elaborate, just made small marks on the paper, circles, lines, simple shapes. But her face showed the first flicker of the artistic concentration I had seen in her bedroom drawings. These are seeds, she said, pointing to the circles. They look like nothing now, but they're going to grow into something beautiful later. I understood that Emma was talking about more than art. She was processing her illness, her treatment, her hope for recovery through the metaphor of seeds and growth. It was sophisticated emotional work disguised as simple drawing. From that day forward, Emma began participating more actively in art activities. But rather than returning to her old style of elaborate fantasy scenes, she developed a new artistic vocabulary focused on transformation and healing. She drew caterpillars becoming butterflies, seeds sprouting into flowers, winter trees growing spring leaves. Her mother wept the first time Emma brought her a picture. It was a drawing of two figures, one lying in a hospital bed, one standing beside it holding hands. Both figures had smile-shaped mouths and hearts drawn on their chests. She's processing her feelings through art, Linda told me. The psychologist has been trying to get her to talk about her fears and hopes, but she communicates better through images. I realized that Emma was teaching me something fundamental about art that I had lost somewhere in my decades of pursuing professional validation. Art wasn't about impressing critics or getting into galleries. Art was about communication, about processing emotions too complex for words, about connecting human experiences across the barriers of age, illness, and circumstance. Emma, I said one afternoon as we worked together on a collaborative painting of a garden where flowers and vegetables grew in impossible colors, you're helping me remember why I became an artist in the first place. She looked at me with serious 7-year-old eyes. Why did you become an artist? Because I wanted to help people feel less alone, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. I wanted to create things that would help people understand that others had felt what they were feeling. Like how my caterpillar picture helped you understand that I was scared about changing but also excited. Exactly like that. Emma smiled, the first genuine, full smile I had seen from her. Then you're a really good artist, Mrs. Victoria, even if galleries don't know it yet. Her comment struck me profoundly. This 7-year-old child fighting for her life had more insight into the purpose and value of art than I had developed in 43 years of trying to be a professional artist. Word of our art activities began spreading through the hospital. Dr. Martinez, the head of pediatric oncology, started referring other departments when children struggled with anxiety or depression. The social work department asked if we could include family members in some sessions, recognizing that parents and siblings also needed outlets for their fear and grief. What you're doing with these children goes beyond just keeping them occupied, Dr. Martinez told me during a meeting about expanding our program. You're helping them process trauma, maintain hope, and express feelings they can't put into words. Have you considered making this a formal therapeutic program? I was stunned. For months, I had been thinking of my volunteer work as simple companionship, basic art instruction for sick children. The idea that it might be recognized as legitimate therapy, as meaningful medical intervention, seemed impossible. I don't have formal training in art therapy, I protested. I'm just an old woman who knows how to paint and happens to enjoy spending time with children. You're an artist who understands how creativity can heal, Dr. Martinez replied. That intuitive understanding, combined with your genuine care for these children, is exactly what we need. Would you be willing to work with our staff to develop a more comprehensive program? That night, I called my daughter Jennifer in Portland for the first time in months. Instead of our usual stilted conversation about my health and her busy life, I found myself excitedly describing the children I worked with, Emma's artistic breakthrough, the possibility of expanding the program. Mom, Jennifer said, and I could hear amazement in her voice. You sound happy. Not just okay, not just coping, actually happy. When did that happen? I paused, realizing she was right. Somewhere during the months of working with the children, my emotional landscape had shifted from gray despair to something approaching joy. I think it happened gradually, I said. These children are teaching me things I never learned in all my years of painting. What kinds of things? That art doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. That creativity is about communication, not competition. That sometimes the most important audience for your work is a 7-year-old girl who needs to know she's not alone in her fear. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Dad would be so proud of you, she said finally. He always believed your art had special power, even when the galleries didn't see it. Maybe he just knew it would find its right purpose eventually. Over the next several months, I worked closely with Dr. Martinez, the hospital's social work department, and a consulting art therapist to develop what would become the Creative Healing Program. We established protocols for using art activities as therapeutic interventions, created assessment tools to track emotional and psychological benefits, and designed different types of sessions for various patient populations. A learning curve was steep for someone who had spent decades focused solely on personal artistic expression. I had to understand how art could be used to help children process medical trauma, how creative activities could reduce anxiety before procedures, how collaborative projects could help families communicate during crisis. But the children themselves remain my best teachers. Marcus taught me how fantasy art could provide escape and control when medical reality felt overwhelming. Sophia showed me how simple sensory experiences could ground anxious children in present moment joy. David's geometric patterns demonstrated that precision and order in art could provide comfort when life felt chaotic. Emma continued to evolve as both artist and teacher. As her medical condition improved, her artwork became more complex and emotionally sophisticated. She began creating what she called feeling maps, abstract pieces that used color, shape, and texture to represent different emotional states. "This is what scared feels like," she explained, showing me a painting dominated by jagged black lines and harsh red splotches. "And this is what hopeful feels like," pointing to another piece filled with gentle curves in soft blues and yellows. These family sessions became some of the most powerful aspects of our program. Parents who had been focused solely on medical outcomes began processing their own emotional needs. Siblings who had been neglected during the crisis found ways to express their confusion and resentment. Families discovered new ways to communicate about impossible subjects. Linda had begun participating in our family art sessions, creating her own pieces that explored her fears and hopes as a parent of a sick child. One piece that particularly moved me showed two figures walking together through a dark forest, with small points of light, stars, candles, flowers, scattered throughout the darkness. It's about learning to see the beauty, even when you're walking through the worst parts of life, Linda explained. Emma's illness has been terrifying, but it's also shown me how strong she is, how strong we both are. The lights in the painting are all the moments of grace we found along the way. But perhaps the most unexpected development was how the program began affecting the hospital staff. Nurses and doctors started requesting brief art sessions for themselves, recognizing that caring for critically ill children took an emotional toll that traditional support services didn't address. "I've been a pediatric oncology nurse for 12 years, said Marie, a woman about my daughter's age who had become a regular participant in our staff sessions. "I thought I had learned how to protect myself emotionally, how to care for these children without taking their pain home with me. But I realize now that I hadn't processed my own grief about the children we lose, my own fear about mortality." Marie's artwork dealt with themes of loss, hope, and the weight of responsibility that healthcare workers carry. Through art, she began working through years of accumulated grief and finding new ways to maintain compassion without burning out. By the program's third year, we had documented remarkable outcomes. Children who participated in regular art activities showed reduced anxiety levels, better treatment compliance, and improved family relationships. Parents reported feeling more connected to their children's experiences and more capable of providing emotional support. Hospital staff experienced less burnout and greater job satisfaction. The program caught the attention of researchers at the State University's medical school, who wanted to study our methods and outcomes more formally. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, a researcher specializing in integrative medicine, approached us about participating in a multi-year study on creative therapies in healthcare settings. What you've developed here represents a significant advancement in pediatric care, Dr. Hawthorne explained during our first meeting. If our research confirms what you've observed anecdotally, that creative expression improves medical outcomes as well as emotional well-being, it could change how hospitals approach patient care nationwide. The prospect of contributing to research that might help thousands of other children and families was both exciting and daunting. I thought about the bitter, isolated woman I had been 4 years earlier, convinced that my artistic abilities were worthless because they hadn't achieved commercial success. 4 years ago, I thought my creative life was over, I told Dr. Hawthorne. I had failed as a professional artist, and I believed that meant I had nothing valuable to contribute. Now someone wants to study the program I helped create because it might change medical practice across the country. What do you think made the difference? She asked. I stopped trying to use art to prove my worth and started using it to serve others' needs, I replied. I learned that the value of creativity isn't measured by external recognition, but by how it helps people heal, communicate, and find meaning in difficult experiences. Emma completed her treatment successfully in the spring of our program's second year. On her last day in the hospital, she presented me with a large painting she had been working on in secret for weeks. A portrait of our art room filled with children and adults creating together, but rendered in the style of her old fantasy drawings, with magical elements woven throughout the realistic scene. In her painting, the art supplies had faces and personalities. The paintings on the wall seemed to move and dance, and all the people were surrounded by soft glows that suggested inner light. It was sophisticated artistic thinking disguised as whimsical children's art. This is how the art room looks in my heart, she told me. It's not just a regular room. It's a place where magic happens, where scared people become brave people, where sad people remember how to be happy. I hung Emma's painting in a place of honor in our art room, and it became a conversation starter with new patients and families. Children would point to different elements and ask about the story, leading to discussions about feelings, fears, and hopes that might not have emerged through direct conversation. The art room really does feel magical, 10-year-old Carlos told me one afternoon, studying Emma's painting. When I come here, I forget that I'm sick. I remember that I'm still me, just me with cancer for now. In the spring of our 4th year, our program received recognition that I never could have imagined. We were selected to receive the National Award for Innovation in Healthcare, an honor that came with substantial funding, and an invitation to present our work at the International Conference on Integrative Medicine. Standing at the podium, in front of hundreds of healthcare professionals from around the world, I thought about my journey from bitter failure to meaningful contribution. 4 years earlier, I couldn't have imagined speaking publicly about anything, much less addressing medical experts about the healing power of art. 4 years ago, I began, looking out at the international audience. I was a failed artist who thought her creative life was over. I had spent decades trying to prove my worth through external validation, accumulating rejection letters instead of recognition, growing more bitter and isolated with each disappointment. I saw nods of recognition in the audience. Clearly, I wasn't the only person who had struggled with professional disappointment and its emotional aftermath. But I learned something crucial from the children I work with, something that transformed not just my understanding of art, but my understanding of what it means to live a meaningful life. Healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, isn't about perfection or professional achievement. It's about authentic connection, about sharing whatever gifts you have in service of others' well-being. I talked about Emma's transformation from frightened silence to vibrant self-expression, about how her feeling maps had revolutionized the way her medical team understood her emotional needs. I described Marcus's fantasy worlds that had given him control and agency when medical reality felt overwhelming. I explained how our family sessions had helped parents and siblings process their own trauma while supporting their sick children. This program succeeded not because I was a professional art therapist, I concluded, but because I was willing to use my skills, whatever their professional value, in service of something larger than my own ego. The children and families we serve taught me that creativity has healing power, not because it produces beautiful objects, but because it provides a language for experiences too complex for words. Now, 3.5 years after I first walked into Mercy General as a broken, bitter woman who thought her creative days were behind her, I find myself living a life I never could have imagined. I coordinate art therapy programs at 2 hospitals, train volunteers in creative healing techniques, and have become a speaker at conferences across the country. My own art has evolved in ways I never expected. The paintings I create now are collected not by prestigious galleries, but by the families of children I've worked with, by hospital staff members who want to remember particular young patients, by other cancer survivors who see their own journeys reflected in my work. Emma, now 10 and cancer-free, still sends me pictures she creates at home. Her artistic skills have developed remarkably, but more importantly, she has maintained the emotional honesty that made her work so powerful when she was 7. She talks about becoming an art teacher herself someday, so I can help kids like you helped me. The program itself has grown beyond our original vision. We now serve over 60 children monthly, have a team of 15 trained volunteer artists, and have spawned similar programs in 8 other hospitals throughout the region. Research conducted by the hospital has documented significant improvements in patient anxiety, treatment compliance, and overall emotional well-being among children who participate in our activities. But perhaps the most important thing we've proven is that healing can happen at any age, in any form, through any doorway, even the ones we never thought to look for. As I reflect on these past 3.5 years, I'm amazed by how completely my understanding of success has changed. When I started painting 43 years ago, success meant gallery exhibitions, critical acclaim, financial reward for my creativity. I spent decades chasing that definition of achievement and feeling like a failure when it eluded me. Now, I measure success differently. Success is Emma's smile when she completes a challenging project. Success is Marcus discovering that he can express his fears through color and line. Success is a parent telling me that their child has found a way to communicate feelings they couldn't put into words. Success is waking up each morning excited about the work ahead, knowing that my skills and experience have found their proper purpose at last. The children in our program continue to teach me daily about resilience, hope, and the power of creative expression to transcend physical limitations. They show me that art is not about perfection, but about truth, not about impressing others, but about connecting with them. Most importantly, they've taught me that it's never too late to discover your true calling, to find the work you are meant to do, to contribute something meaningful to the world around you. When Charles died, I thought my capacity for love and service died with him. When my artistic career failed to materialize as I had dreamed, I thought my creativity was worthless. I was wrong on both counts. Love and creativity don't diminish when they're not returned in the way we expect. They multiply when they're given freely in service of others' healing. If I could share one message from my journey, it would be this: your gifts, whatever they are, have value not because they bring you recognition, but because they can bring comfort, joy, and healing to others. Your experience, even the painful parts, especially the painful parts, can become wisdom that helps others navigate their own difficult journeys. Don't let disappointment or loss convince you that you have nothing left to offer. Sometimes our most important contributions come not from our successes, but from how we transform our failures into service. The canvas doesn't ask an artist how old she is before accepting paint. It simply provides the surface and allows the creative process to unfold. You have colors within you that haven't been mixed, images that haven't been captured, stories that haven't been told. Paint something new. Create from your deepest truth. Share your gifts not for applause, but for connection, and prepare to discover that in helping others heal, you heal yourself in ways you never expected. As I write this, I'm sitting in our art room at Mercy General, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of children working on their latest projects. The walls are covered with their creations, not masterpieces that would hang in museums, but authentic expressions of young lives finding beauty and hope in the midst of struggle. Across the room, a new volunteer is helping a shy 8-year-old boy choose colors for his painting. She's a retired teacher who called last week, nervous about whether she had anything to offer. I see in her the same uncertainty I felt 3.5 years ago, the same question about whether someone like her could make a difference. I watch as the boy shows her his painting, and her face lights up with genuine delight at his work. She's discovering what I learned from Emma, from Marcus, from Sophia, and from all the children who have honored me with their trust, that we heal each other not through perfection, but through presence, not through expertise, but through authenticity. We are all creating here, in our own time and in our own way, proving daily that life's most meaningful masterpieces are often collaborative works, painted not on canvas, but on the hearts of those we serve. The brushstrokes you add to someone else's healing may seem small, but they contribute to something larger and more beautiful than you can imagine. Trust your colors. Trust your instincts. And remember, it's never too late to begin creating something that matters.